Yeah,
Yes,
that's
I
all that
think everyone sees
matters.
us.
That's all
Okay.
that matters.
Okay.
So,
Good
you know
morning. Let's
what?
start again.
Yes, let's go. Let's jump right in. Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us what you do. By the way, you have a huge fan club. Like I personally am not so active on Instagram. I'm more active off of Instagram. And I posted this flyer on my personal WhatsApp status. And I got so many messages like, wow, I love her. I'm so glad you're having her. She's great. She's amazing. So
Thank
I feel like we have a little bit of a
you.
celebrity here today. So why don't you
Thank
introduce
you. That's so
yourself?
sweet to share that with me. Okay, so hi, Rachel Goodman here. I am a registered dietitian, and like you guys were talking about, it was weird because when I logged back in, I could still see the stuff that you were sharing before. But anyway, like you guys said, I call myself a food therapist, not because I'm, a licensed therapist, but because when I explain what I do, people would start telling me, oh, so you're like a food therapist, which like literally makes so much sense because I help clients who struggle with, like you said, binge eating, disordered eating, which will explain what that means. Because I think a lot of people, it's very, look at it as just one end of the spectrum. You either don't have an eating disorder, you have an eating disorder. So if I don't have an eating disorder, I'm okay. And that's not necessarily the case. And this is where disordered eating comes from. So we'll talk about that spectrum. And really, if I were just to explain it in simple terms for someone to relate it to their life, it's when you feel out of control with food, when you're constantly feeling guilty about what you eat, when you're constantly having this food noise of, should I have it? Should I not? Okay, I'll have it. Just one bite. Okay, no, I had one bite. Now I'm so bad. I ruined my diet. Okay, I'm just gonna eat everything. Now I feel gross. Now I'm gonna cut out sugar tomorrow. Now I'm going to the event and I can't have this. It's like so exhausting, and you're constantly, criticizing your body as well, because all this is really, for many people, stems from body image issues. So you're also hating on your body. So my goal as a registered dietitian is to get you to truly a healthy place. Not what diet culture says is healthy, of like, let's cut out this or let's count calories, but how do we get to a place where you feel empowered with food, where you can enjoy a piece of cake and not lose control, where you can have a salad and you're not feeling like someone's forcing it down your throat, or you have to eat it with like plain lemon juice or something. And I think the best way to describe it is helping you feel normal with food again, where it should be something that feels natural, right? Like we shower and we go to the bathroom and we do all these things, and eating, yeah, it takes a little bit more effort in like, making your meals and all of that, but it shouldn't be that hard. It should feel a lot more natural, just like these other tasks that you do to take care of your life. So that's what I help people do. I help take them from a place of stress with food, anxiety, guilt, and it ranges on the spectrum of how severe it is, and we'll talk about it, to feeling empowered and confident with food and being able to live their life, being able to go to a restaurant and not worrying that they're gonna like, gorge on the food and come home feeling good, being able to go for a dinner or sit for breakfast with your kids and not feel guilty that you're having pancakes with them, and build memories. So ultimately, be able to feel empowered with food, good in your body, and be able to live life beyond food, because food is important. Of course, I'm a dietitian. I know that. We all know that. But it's also important to enjoy life beyond your plate.
So can I just jump right in and talk specifically about teenagers?
Sure.
Because that to me is that if the mom is having those struggles, how even more so that can be kind of affect the household environment around teenagers. So I feel like it's like all a cycle
Yes.
of, we have to empower ourselves and understand our own relationship with food so that we can better address it with our own children, boys and girls. Because, and
Absolutely.
I think that's another misconception, which we can get to later, about that this is affecting girls more, which probably it is, but boys can have disordered eating as well.
Yeah, yeah. And I think
Um,
we'll get to talking about it, but one of the risk factors to developing disordered eating and then leading that to an eating disorder is the environment. Like the home environment plays a huge role, if not one of the biggest roles. It's not the only
right.
role, of course. You can grow up in a healthy home environment. There are things that are out of control, which we'll talk about. But like 95% of the clients that I work with, like we're talking about childhood. Like there's always someone in childhood that, made comments or was dieting themselves, and we can dive more into that, but 100%, that is very important.
And we could
So
also
this
talk about peer pressure, because you could
right.
have a perfectly functioning home and then go to school and all the girls are talking about is how skinny and beautiful they look, and
Yeah.
having, topics around like, what did you bring for lunch? And that's not healthy. I mean, or bad for you.
Yeah. Exactly. That's why, again, we want to set up a healthy environment, but there are things that are not in our control. So how do we navigate that? 100%.
So
So let's dive in.
essentially, we're breaking a cycle, because by dealing with the parents, it could break a cycle that's been going on for who knows how long, and just get rid of,
Generations.
right.
Yeah. It could feel very overwhelming or scary or nerve-wracking, or like, you're freaking out, oh my God, but also very empowering, because as the parent, you have so much influence, and that can be scary, but that could also be amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So
Okay,
where
so
do we start?
I feel like there's so much to talk about, and I want to talk about it all. So I want you to kind of take the lead on.
Disordered eating. Let's start there.
Yes. Let's understand what disordered eating is, and know how do we differentiate from eating disorder. Because eating disorders, everyone seems to have assumptions that they know what it is, which, by the way, I think we need to just say right away, where we have this image of an eating disorder as someone that's emaciated. Like growing up, was that your image? I mean, also in movies and things, like I always thought, okay, if you're emaciated, you have an eating disorder, but only about 6% of people who have an eating disorder will be underweight. Most people are not underweight, which is important to understand, because a lot of people think, oh, I look fine, I look healthy, I'm not sick enough, so like I don't need help, but that is not the case. And so weight is something to look out for in terms of how fast someone is losing weight, if you're dealing with something like anorexia, but it's not the only thing. And so the best way to describe disordered eating versus eating disorder is think about all of us are on a spectrum. And people who are healthy, who have a healthy relationship with food, are over here, right? And then people who are kind of like struggling with their eating habits, maybe they're just like their eating habits are all over the place, but they're not really feeling guilty or whatever, they're over here. Then you have the people who start to feel guilty about what they eat, and they stress out about it, and they start like, feeling bad that it has sugar and it's so bad and it's so toxic and I shouldn't have it. They start to have this dialogue. That's already veering into disordered eating, because you're starting to have stress around food. It's also not necessarily about health. You might cloak it in health, but really in the back of your mind, you're like, I need to lose weight, right? It's about weight loss. And we could talk about the difference between your intentions of health and weight loss, because there is room to say, hey, I want to have less sugar for my health, but you need to be honest with yourself. Is it really about your health, and how much anxiety and stress is it giving you? Because that will be an indicator if you're really going about it in a healthy way, because it shouldn't stress you out. Right. And so that's already kind of getting into disordered eating, and that can get more severe with like being mean to yourself with your body image, and overeating all the time, emotional eating, not necessarily binge eating. I think a lot of people think if I just overeat, it's binge eating. They're different things. Binge eating is a really high volume of food in a short amount of time, versus overeating is you might have like 3 slices of cake, but then 3 hours later you'll have something else, or 2 hours later you'll have something else. That's more like of the overeating. So they're not necessarily the same, but you see how it's like starting to get more severe. Then it starts to, how often are you binge eating? Or are you now binging once a week, feeling shame, feeling guilt? Okay, we're entering into eating disorder territory. Or if you have anorexia, like, are you starting to skip meals all the time? And you're not binge eating, but you're just getting more and more restrictive. Are you getting more and more rigid? Do you now skip out on social events and not eat anything? Are you making more and more excuses? And especially with teens, are they starting to make excuses? Teens are very good with excuses. They're like, no, I literally just spoke to a mom, and she said her daughter told her that pasta started to make her nauseous. But her kid was eating pasta just fine for years, and now it started to make her nauseous. These kind of warning signs are starting to get into eating disorder territory. And so it's a spectrum. And obviously the more severe the disordered eating gets, the more you're entering in like eating disorder territory, which there is diagnostic like markers to diagnose officially by a medical professional. But I don't want people to think, this is the big mistake people make. It's like, I have to wait till I get some kind of diagnosis to get help, and I'm just fine. But if you're starting to even veer away from this healthy spot, and food is starting to consume your mind, and you're starting to obsess about it, you're starting to feel guilty about it, you're starting to feel out of control with it, or you're starting to be scared of eating certain foods, that's a soon enough time to start getting help, especially for parents with teens. That's enough of a warning sign to not necessarily tell your daughter anything just yet, or make a whole big thing about it, or take her to a dietitian, but you should reach out to a dietitian to ask her questions, to make sure like, hey, do I need to be concerned here, right? So
Can
don't
you
feel like you have to
can
wait
you
till things are bad, whether
sorry
for you or for your teen.
sorry, I don't, because you can't see me. I want to know if we can just touch on that for a second. When should somebody call a dietitian for for themselves to help their child? At what point should someone reach out for help?
And let
For,
me and
for
let
their
me let
teen,
me
for their
add on
teen.
to that. Let me add on to that. I heard you say the parent should call, not because I'm thinking, why would you send a child to a dietitian? They're not making their meals.
These
They're not in charge. You
are
know, they don't have
teenagers,
agency.
right? So we
Yeah,
want to kind of focus on
yeah,
teens. These are not 7, 8, 9-year-olds. These
right.
are 13 to
So
18. So the
I
mom.
think that's important that the parent should be going to the dietitian.
So with teens also, this applies to teens. So yes, teens will need to go to the dietitian if there's an issue, but I always recommend before you go straight into like, let me take my kid to a dietitian, first, as a parent, reach out and see if the kid is at a place where you need to send them and in what way to go about it and how to have the conversation with your child. And it also depends on the age. Is this a 12-year-old or is this an 18-year-old? That's going to vary in how it's going to go down. So reaching out to either an eating disorder therapist or an eating disorder dietitian, schedule a session with the
This
parents,
is you.
share your concerns. What's
This
that?
is what you do, correct?
Yeah, so either scheduling with a dietitian or it could also be a therapist. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Like it depends also what else is going on. Was there like a trauma involved? What's the family dynamic? Like use, your sense and like what makes sense, but definitely a professional who works in that field. I have people DMing me. I mean, I think even the fact that a parent, obviously my DMs are not a place for consultation, but I always welcome parents or people themselves to reach out if they feel they need help, because then I could tell them, based on what you're sharing with me, I recommend scheduling a session, to talk through this,
Okay.
right? To see, okay, what else is going on. So even if like you DM a therapist on Instagram or a dietitian on Instagram, like just to ask, hey, can you help me with this? Or, do you think I need to like schedule a session for this? So start off with the parent, and then the child will still need to go if as a teenager if there is an issue. Now if you this is if you're not sure, if you clearly see there's an issue of the things that I'm sharing, like your kid is skipping meals, you see a clear change in behaviors. I'll give you an example of a mom was like, her daughter actually was like saying how like she feels bad to eat ice cream and she lost a significant amount of weight in a short amount of time. Like that's already okay. I know my kid needs to go, but still, I would always say let the parent make the first move, and then together you can decide how to navigate the conversation with the child to get them into therapy or with the dietitian.
Hmm.
Does that give clarity? Do you have any
Yeah.
other questions
Okay.
on that?
I mean, I have so many questions because I feel like this is something that starts even younger than teenagers. And I know that some of our audience may not have teenagers. What are some things that parents can do from a young age? What are some terms? What are some things that we are unknowingly telling our children without knowing, with body image, with everything you're saying makes so much sense because we can even say something so innocent as, wow, we say to each other, wow, you lost weight, you look amazing.
Oh my God, I'm so glad you brought that up because, I can make the list. I will share with you things of like, things that clearly sound negative not to do. But so many people see weight loss compliments as positive. So they don't think it's a problem. Like, oh, I feel good and all of that. But what happens is that if your child, and I'm assuming you're talking about even as young as like 4, 5, 6,
Yes.
7, like really
Yes.
young. If your child is growing up in an environment where they hear that mommy's body is being praised, where their sister's body is being praised. I'll give you an example. A client that I work with, she's 18 now. When I spoke to her, and she's like terrified to put on weight or to like not lose weight, but to like kind of significantly change from where she's at. And I told her, like, I asked her, well, what's so amazing about being thin? Like, let's make a list of things. It could be some things are true, but like, are they? Let's talk about it. And one of the things she listed was that she grew up with her older sister constantly being admired and complimented for how thin she is. And when you're a child, being recognized is associated with safety. So if you're constantly seeing that people are recognized for being thin, you translate it as like, oh, if I'm thin, I'll be liked. from thin, I'll be desirable. And as adults, we can be able to say like, okay, I'm not for everyone, not everyone needs to like me. But as a child, they translate like admiration, validation, acceptance, all these things as safety. And that can really, from the get-go, create this narrative of like being smaller is better. And then they start to also, especially if they are a bigger child and their parent is like making comments on like, oh, I lost weight. And the parent in their mind is like, I would never tell my kid to lose weight or comment. But children internalize things, and then they'll start to compare their body to their mom's body, be like, oh, I'm bigger than mom. And mom's saying she hates when she's bigger, so my body is bad. And she's saying it's good when it's smaller, so like I need to be smaller. And they pick up from a very young age, like things like eating less, right? So when I was 11 years old, I don't know where I picked it up from, but I knew if I eat less, I'll lose weight. So my first diet was skipping recess because I'm like, I'm not gonna eat my recess snack. I'm gonna eat less, right? And so you pick it up. So I would definitely say weight loss comments, reframing how you view that and recognizing they're not actually compliments if you think about the message it's communicating. Because when the first thing you say to someone when you see them, oh my God, you look amazing, you're so thin, then it's like, oh, well, imagine if you would replace that comment with like, I notice you more and you have more value now and I like you more, whatever it is, even though we don't technically like someone more, but kind of that communication, like, would you ever say that? Probably not. And then what happens is also for the person who lost weight, and this is also something I see that happens a lot with teens, who don't initially do a diet to necessarily be super thin. They'll just do it with friends. Like, oh, we're all doing intermittent fasting.
Right.
We're all doing macros. Like, it's like a peer pressure group thing. They don't always do it to, like, be skinny. Sometimes they really do it to, like, I want to get healthier. And they'll, like, go to the gym and maybe eat more fruits and vegetables and less cake and cookies. And they're not really doing anything disordered. But then they will lose weight. And then the compliments come. And now they're scared to gain weight because they're going to lose that. And then it starts to get more severe and more severe and more severe. So I'm so glad that you brought that up as the first thing, because that's definitely a huge factor that I see in developing disordered eating and eating disorders, where there are weight loss compliments. And it's not about the compliment itself. It's seeing beyond of like, what does that communicate to your child about them? They're a child. As adults, we kind of translate that and we struggle. So more so a child whose brain is not fully developed in understanding.
Right.
What are your thoughts? I could go
I mean,
on. I have a whole list.
can I ask you, what are some phrases that we can give our children instead, or things that we can say to each other when we're in front? Because I know that I have 3 daughters, and I, from a young age, I would always say to them, let's make healthy eating choices. And I don't know if that was the right thing to do. I don't know. I was doing it because I thought, I don't want to say to them, don't eat that snack, but I would say, is that a healthy eating choice? So
Mm.
that, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts about that.
And I think
So,
go and like adding on to that, just creating a culture, and I would love for you to go into that, creating a culture, teaching parents how to create it in your home, that it health, you want your heart to, what's good for your heart, what's good for your skin, what's good for your eyes. It's not about what's bad for you and what's going to happen if you eat that. It's about, if you eat this, it's going to be so good, you'll have more energy during the day. So just to change the whole attitude and the whole culture in your home.
yeah, so I think first I'm going to answer both. I'll start with Shayna's comment on like telling them that it's healthy. So it's not like inherently a bad thing to say. It all depends on, people translate health in so many different ways. So you can have a parent where healthy means you can never have sugar. That's a problem. That's going to create a lot of cravings for sugar, a lot of morality around sugar. So it really depends. And you'll see this a lot as a theme when it comes to raising healthy kids or healing your relationship with food and living a healthy life. It's context and nuance. Like, what are you referring to? One parent will say this is healthy, another parent will say this is healthy. One parent will really be communicating something that's healthy, and the other who's saying it's healthy, it's not. So we really first need to understand and get clear on, like, when you say something is healthy or not healthy, what are you referring to? And first assess for yourself, is this really coming from like an empowering, nourishing way of wanting my kids to eat nutrient dense foods? Or is it a lot of toxic messaging of morality, good and bad? I'm scared my kid's gonna gain weight. How often are you saying it to your kids? Like, in what tone are you saying it? Are you selecting one child over the other? You know? So that's one thing. But in terms of actually helping them understand health and empowering to make healthy choices, in terms of, here I'm going to translate healthy choices into nutrient dense choices, because again, it's context. Sometimes choosing the cake, especially if the kid is at a birthday party, it's a healthy choice to be able to eat a slice of cake, enjoy it, and move on with everybody, right? It's not healthy to isolate yourself, to eye the cake the entire time and think, no, don't have, you're going to be good, and watch everybody else eat. And, you know, it's not a healthy mental state to be in. But in terms of the children, so first of all, it really starts when they're younger, in terms of the way you're going to structure your meal time. So it's a little bit different than the intuitive eating approach. It's more so called division of responsibility by Elaine Satter. So what that means is, when the kids are young, if you want to set them up to be intuitive eaters and have a healthy, natural relationship with food, you as the parent decide what's going to be served, where, and when. So you create the structure, you choose the food options, of course with consideration to what your child likes, right? We're not going to force them to have foods they don't like. And then the child decides what they're going to eat off their plate, like if they're going to eat that food, and how much. Now, we're not talking about, if you have a picky eater or someone with sensory issues, obviously get help. We're not talking about kids like that. And there's ways to go about that. But for this conversation, we're talking about kids who like will have some foods, right? You're not having like a severe picky eater or anything like that in this situation. And so, yes, you are creating that environment in the beginning with not much talk. It's more so modeling behavior, showing them you're eating the potatoes and the chicken and the broccoli, and you can also enjoy ice cream with them on an ice cream date, right? So it's creating an environment. Now, as they get older, you do want to start giving them more information, and like Danit said, focusing truly on how cool is this, look what it does to your body. Like, I'll give you an example. My daughter was constipated, and I told her, I'm like, you know, it'll probably help you to eat more vegetables and drink more water, because that's going to help with your digestion. So that's educating her nutritionally. My kids know that I always tell them, like, okay, you want this? Okay, we're going to add a protein, because protein is going to, you know, be good for your muscles and your bones, and it's also going to help you feel fuller. Like, if you have the bread, you can have the bread. It's going to give you energy, but that energy is not going to last long if you don't have it with protein. So it's giving the nutrition education truly about what it's doing for your body. Or let's say when we talk about candy, so, I'll say candy's a fun food. It has some energy, but it doesn't give you a lot more, but it's okay to enjoy it. If you have a lot of it, you're not going to feel good. We want to have, more variety and nutrients. Or you don't have to always say yes to your kid for like ice cream. Like, let's say if I'm about to serve dinner, my kid really wants ice cream. Either I'll tell them you can have it at another time, so they know they can have it. My kids know they can have ice cream. Or I'll tell them, let's have it with dinner. Right? Like, not just on its own, because yeah, you don't want them to get full on just ice cream. So there is a way to raise intuitive eaters that like eat healthy and eat a variety of foods. You'll notice that it's not as much talking as you think it is when they're younger, and as they're teens, really focusing, like, you shouldn't be telling your kids how much calories something is. Like, who cares? Calories don't tell you anything about nutrient density, and then also encouraging them to tune into their body when they're young. I'll give you an example. The other day, my daughter was eating dinner. She wanted a second serving. So I asked her, I didn't say, no, you don't need a second serving. I said, is your tummy full? Like, are you still hungry? How's your tummy feeling? Like, I prompted her at a young age to understand that that's something to listen out for, right? Because they don't know to listen out for it when they're young. You want to prompt them. And she said, yeah, I'm still hungry. So I gave her more, and she ended up eating about half that bowl. And that was fine, right? Because you're not telling them, no, you've had enough, and deciding for them, but you are creating a structured environment, and you are encouraging them to tune into their body cues so that they have that skill growing up, and you'll set the environment. Another thing, for example, is like, I tell my kids, like, I don't want you to read books or to watch movies when you're like, and eat at the same time, right? And I have exceptions, of course, like, we're human. Sometimes it's fun to like have something fun and watch a movie, you know? But for the most part, I explain to them, I'm like, it's really hard to listen to your body when you're eating. I want you to pay attention to your food, and then we'll go read. So there's so many, I mean, we can do a whole conversation just on this, but that's just a few things. Is that helpful? Do you have any questions on that?
That was very, very helpful. I guess the questions I have more are like, how can we talk to our teenagers about peer pressure and food?
Hmm. So it's really like start with where you're, first of all, nutrition education and talking about their bodies. You don't have to wait for peer pressure for that to happen. Again, it's the overall environment that you're creating in the home. They see how you're behaving, right? Like, are you cutting out foods? Are you talking badly about your body? Make sure that you're healing that and not that they don't see that from you.
Can you be
Um,
specific? Can you be specific about some things that people don't even know they're saying that are negative connotations about their body? Because I feel like it's such an important um, issue of like self-talk, self-image, and that creates unhealthy body image issues of like, oh my gosh, I feel so fat today. Like people, I hear it. I hear it all the time. Where oh my gosh, it's stemming from us, the adults, where we're even at a Shabbos table or I'll be somewhere and I only learned this later of like how careful my words have to be around food and teenagers. Even I know small children for sure, but even teenagers, they're so impressionable. So what you're saying about the peer pressure, yes, it has to start in the home. But what are some healthy things that we can say out loud about our bodies? Because I feel like that's something that I think we don't even know we're doing.
Right. And things
mhm.
we shouldn't say that we don't realize.
Yeah. So you want me to share with you negative things we don't realize we're saying not to say around kids, and then positive things to say, and then how
Yes.
to go about the
Yes.
things they come home with from school with peer pressure and how to navigate that. Just to
Yes.
recap.
You got it.
Okay.
Yes.
So with like negative things, like even comments like to your friend and like, oh my God, I just ate so much chocolate, I'm so bad. I'm gonna jog an extra mile. Like you're teaching compensatory behaviors. Like, oh, I ate chocolate and now that was a problem. I have to figure out a way to get rid of that, right? Or for example, like, oh my God, these like let's say you'll talk to a friend, it's like, oh, um, you think that's bad? Like I just gained 10 pounds this year. You know what I'm saying? Like on the phone, and you don't realize like your kids are hearing this, or even things like what you said with that comment, I feel fat. And so it's not the fact that you said I feel fat, right? There are people who are fat, and that can just be a descriptive term. It's the tone in which someone's saying it. A lot of people who say I feel fat, what they really mean is I feel physically uncomfortable. I worry people are going to judge me. I worry I'm not going to be accepted, right? It's the underlying message that they're sharing, and that's what they're communicating to their kid. So something like, let me just check how much calories is this. Wow, that's a lot of calories. Like you're not even talking about size, but like your kids know, you know? So these are the kind of things to look out for. Even just like random comments you'll make to a friend, or even like we make a joke about it, right? We like kind of commiserate with others. I used to do this all the time where, you know, my friend would be like, oh my God, I just ate so much cake. And I would be like, oh, you think you ate a lot? You should have seen me. What I ate. Oh my God, I'm so bad. Right? And we just kind of like sometimes even joke about it, but it's really not a joke. We do it to comfort ourselves because we're struggling, and then our kids hear it. So that's one of like just a few negative things to be aware of, like how you're talking about, whether you're directly talking about your body size or just talking in a negative way about your eating habits.
Okay.
Now let's flip it to the positive, because we don't want to be a Debbie Downer, right? It's like, what are positive things that we can do? And so in terms of your body, you can say like, wow, I worked out and I feel so strong. And even like
Love
have your
that.
kids, right? Like see your kids, like I'll sometimes, you know, it's sometimes really annoying, honestly. Like you want to work out in your silence, but sometimes like if the kids are around, I have a whole bunch of different size weights, and my kids will get so excited to like do it. And then my daughter will come to me like, oh, feel my muscle, and like make it all about that. Like, look how strong we are, and like, you know, even ask them to join. Like, do you want to work out with me. Like you're gonna feel so amazing after. Make it about how you're gonna feel and how strong you are. And talking about, let's say, like you're pregnant or something, and it's like talk about how amazing the body is. Like, look what the body's doing. Try to talk more about how amazing the body functions versus just what it looks like. And it's okay to still give compliments about how you look. It is a part of us. You can absolutely say that that dress is gorgeous. Your makeup looks great. I'll tell my daughter if she puts on a really cool outfit, I'm like, well, that's a cool outfit. You look great. I love it, right? But we can do that without making it about body size. Like, we absolutely can compliment people on how they look. It's a great feeling. But just don't tie their value of that to what size they are. Other things that we can do is, like, again, model the behavior, and then also talk about, like, look how crunchy this food is. It's so good. But then we're talking about the teenagers. So talking about, wow, I ate this meal. This salad just made me feel so good. It was, like, so filling. I felt like I needed that hydration, and, like, that fiber is going to be digested so well. So it's really keeps on being the same theme of, like, functionality, both with food and with movement and with body, over, morality and, like, tying that to your worth.
Right.
You got
What do
it.
you think? And
Yes.
in terms of the peer pressure, so you can only know about the peer pressure if you notice it at home, which hopefully you will. So if, let's say, your daughter comes and tells you about a diet that kids are doing, you can ask her about it. Oh, really? Like, what? Not a judgy, attacking, freaking out way, right? But get curious, like, oh, really? Like, what are they doing? And then, based on what they share with you, if, let's say, they say intermittent fasting or anything like that, you can ask, like, well, why are they doing that? It's really explaining to them. It's like, well, do you think it's a good idea to ignore your hunger? And explaining what hunger does to the body. So because they're old enough place where you don't have to explain science to them, but you can explain in simple terms that hunger tells you you're low on energy, and your body's so brilliant that it tells you when you need to eat. And so ignoring that is not healthy. And they can say, oh, well, they want to lose weight, and, have those conversations like, okay, well, why do they want to lose weight? And you can also be honest in, like, marketing, teaching them about marketing. When you go on Instagram, TikTok, like, look, they're trying to sell you on this. They want to get your, right, a lot of times with supplements or different things, it's like helping them be savvy and understanding marketing as well, and asking them, okay, well, what's their goal here? Like, what do they really want for you? Being honest. And yeah, some people will judge body sizes, but there will be plenty of people who don't. Like, what do you appreciate about your body, right? Also explaining to them that these diets don't really actually work, and it's going to mess them up even more. That you probably will more likely be you'll likely gain even more weight in the long run doing these diets than just not doing them at all. So it depends on what peer pressure stuff the kid is bringing home to you. I'll even give you an example. My daughter wasn't even a teenager. She was 7. When she was 7, a few years ago, she came home and she was, like, talking about calories. She's like, how many calories? Like, she was eating a candy. She's like, how many calories does this happen? I was so taken aback. I was like, you're 7. I'm not ready for this.
Wow.
But I was like, well, why do you want to know? Like, what do you need of calories? Like, no, because my friend told me about calories. I remember exactly what she said. I'm like, well, the calories just mean it's a measure of energy, and you don't need the number to know that. So we don't have to worry about that. Just pay attention to how it's like, are you enjoying it? How's it making you feel? So you can explain things to them when they say calorie counting, right? It's like, well, do you know what a calorie is? Help them understand that they shouldn't just accept things at face value. And this can go so deep because we didn't even get into the body image factor. Like, is your kid being bullied? Do they feel bad about their body? Do they want to do it just because peer pressure, because everyone's doing it and it's a thing to do together? Or do they want to do it because they feel badly about their body regardless, and now it's an opportunity to have support from their friends? So it really depends what the peer pressure is that they're coming home with. But what I recommend is, like, always stay open, ask questions, and try to get in there based on what they're responding to you, and answer specifically to that response of, like, does this make sense? Who told you this? If your friend told you this, like, are they a credible, like, what makes them a credible source? Like, okay, so your 15-year-old friend told you intermittent fasting is a great idea at 15. I mean, at any age, but especially at 15 years old, where you're still developing, explaining to them development. you're still developing. And especially I think at the age of around 10, 11, 12, a lot of kids, have you noticed this? And anyone who's watching can share in the comments. Like a lot of kids will suddenly kind of get like rounder and bigger. Like they'll suddenly put on weight. Not everyone, but a lot
Yep.
of kids around that age will suddenly put on weight, and parents will be like, "Oh my gosh, she just gained so much weight." But it's very normal because they're having a lot of hormonal changes. Some of that fat also supports hormonal changes, especially in women with like estrogen. Like you need fat for that. And also sometimes they'll put on all this weight before their height kicks in. And so if you leave it alone, they'll grow into whatever healthy weight it is for them, whether they're big, small, in between. But that's, I think, where it's a very vulnerable point in time where also the parents worry they put on this whole bunch of weight and then the kid starts to feel bad. So talking to the kid about body diversity, understanding that, a lot of it is marketing, but also knowing how to stand in their value. So what do you like about yourself? If they feel like it sucks that's to be that size or whatever it is, we don't have to deny their reality and say, well, what sucks about it? If you're a parent who struggle with your body image too, you can share that and say like, yeah, I was made to feel bad too, but you know what? This is how Hashem made me. This is how like God made me. I'm so happy. Look at how many people are living amazing lives in different body sizes. Normalize body diversity so they could see that not being thin is not this like bad life sentence. They're like amazing people who are amazing, living amazing lives, but they don't know that in their small bubble. So all this to say, keep an ear out when they're coming with things. Start to question them on that, educate them on that, and give them skills to think critically. What are your thoughts?
I just want to say this is so informative and so um, powerful because even the little suggestions you're making are so huge, and the awareness that I feel, especially in the Jewish community, because we have Yontif every other month. There's another holiday, another simcha, another thing, and it's like everything's revolved around food, and it's like it's our culture, and so I feel like that it's kind of like empowering us moms to educate ourselves first, understand
Absolutely.
what we struggle with, know where we're holding in our own body image issues. Because if we don't do that for ourselves, we can't give it to our kids.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very challenging. I mean, there are very few moms who like really really struggle, but to an extent like try to hide it from their kids as they work through it, which is already a step forward. But it's very difficult for sure. Like if you're struggling, like your kids see it. I just spoke to a mom who basically never told her kid to diet or anything like that, but she wouldn't eat carbs in the evenings or things like that. And now her daughter is kind of like, she's very young, she's kind of doing the same things, and she's like, I never told her anything, but I know that she saw me, so now she's eating like carbs and being like, look, you want to eat it with me, as like an example. But that's good that she's taking that measure now, but as much as possible to create awareness before the problem even begins.
So how do we, I mean, I'm curious what you do in your house over all the Chagim and Yamim Tovim, like with, Shavuos is around the corner and it's an eating fest. And then we go straight into Shabbos. And there is something about overeating over Yontif, where there's challah, there's cheesecakes, and these are all great things in moderation. This is all things that everyone should be enjoying. But there is something in the culture that borderlines not healthy, eating at 11 o'clock at night and serving 17 different types of desserts and all that stuff. How can we balance loving our Yamim Tovim, loving what we're doing, loving and implementing that into our home, but at the same time wanting to keep our kids healthy around sugars and foods and overeating? Because at the end of the day, we don't want our kids to be unhealthy. We don't want our kids eating 17 pieces of cheesecake over a 2-day period. So how can we balance that over a yontif?
Yeah. So first of all, if your kid is eating 17 slices of cheesecake over Yom Tiv, that would be a red flag. That's what I'm
Right.
saying. Like,
We
But
have
you know
other
what I mean?
issues.
I mean, I don't mean 17. I'm being a little
a
bit,
lot,
exaggeration,
yeah.
but
So,
a
so,
lot.
so even so, I'm going to start with sharing that what's happening. First of all, you said moderation. Let's also understand moderation in a little bit more of a context where it's not just day to day. It's like, how often do you have 2 days of cheesecake? out of 365 days of the year, if you have an overall healthy relationship with food all year round, those 2 days, even if you end up overeating, are not gonna make or break
Love
your health. So
that.
seeing moderation, right, as not just moderation in my day-to-day, but like let's zoom out on the bigger picture is, how do I eat all year round? Is this 2 days of having, let's say, more cheesecake than I would all year really make a difference, right? So that's, first of all, your overall relationship with food is gonna determine also how you experience the holiday. So a lot of people who feel like they really go out of control on holidays, they likely also have an unhealthy relationship with food before the holidays. So I want to first also normalize overeating on Yom Tov. Like, it doesn't mean like I think people see overeating as Yom Tov as like really bad, and then they get into this all or none mentality of like, oh, I overate, now I'm gonna eat more. But like, if you would have just stopped at like having whatever it is that you overate and feeling overly full, that fullness would have passed, it would have been fine. But now the all or none mentality of like, I overate, so I was bad, so now I'm gonna eat more. Now you feel stuffed, now you feel gross. So you really want to check the mentality of it. And also, I personally go into holidays always telling myself, like, yeah, I might overeat. I want to enjoy it. I'm here with family. There is so much food. I want to enjoy it. I don't want to feel gross, because there were years that I felt gross and bloated, and that's no longer the case. So if you're feeling gross and bloated and stuffed, that's an indicator of, okay, I need to work on my relationship with food, whether it's a holiday or not. So I recommend people going into a holiday, first of all, if you overeat, don't make a big deal out about it. Don't now sabotage the rest of your holiday because, oh my God, you overate. Did you enjoy it? Are you present with your family? It's normal. It happens. It's not going to make or break your health just those 2 days. Now let's get to, okay, then how do we actually eat in a way that feels good on holidays? So like I said, number one, what's your overall relationship with food? Because that's going to determine how you experience the holiday. It's going to be very stressful and out of control if you don't have a healthy relationship with food and are constantly trying to restrict. Or what I used to do is like I would try to do these crash diets before so that I wouldn't feel bad for overeating and gaining weight on the Yom Tov, which just was awful because then I would like stuff my face and feel nasty, and it wasn't because of the holiday. That's the thing. It was just I didn't have the skills to cope with it either way. So now let's say you're going into it with like a healthy relationship with food and you want to eat optimally. First of all, how hungry are you? Like, you want to make sure you're not overly hungry, coming overly hungry to your meal. So, because holidays can be hectic, right? But you don't want to forget to nourish yourself, because if you come overly hungry to the meal, you're kind of setting yourself up to be much more likely to overeat and lose control, because the lower your blood sugar goes, which is hunger, right? So the hungrier you are, it's a reflection of your blood sugar. It means your blood sugar is lower. And the lower that it goes, the hungrier that you get, the more urgency your brain has, because your body's a survival mechanism. It doesn't know that you have this huge table of cheesecake and blintzes, right? It just knows that right now we're really, really hungry. And so it's going to start to create mechanisms of like really urging you to eat. And also, have you ever noticed that when you're overly hungry, like when you're kind of comfortably hungry, you can go and prepare yourself like some vegetables and salmon and whatever meal it is that you want. But the second you start to get overly hungry, where you're just like, give me something now, you're hangry, right? Do you ever notice that now you're like much more likely to reach out for the cookies on the shelf and just inhale a whole bunch? Does that ever happen?
Yeah.
That's also a physiological reasoning for it, because cakes and cookies will convert to energy much faster than salmon and salad. And your body wants the energy in your blood sugar to go up as fast as possible from a survival mechanism, because it's so low, because you're so hungry. And so now you're thinking, I need to have willpower, I need to wait. But it's very hard to do that when your body's literally pushing you and urging you to just inhale the food. And then it's also your brain needs energy to make conscious food choices. And when your energy is depleted in your body, it affects your brain. So it's harder to then make conscious food choices. So now you're presented with this, you're starving. It's going to be, it's not that it's impossible, but it's going to be a lot more challenging to be present, to say, okay, what are the options? What do I actually want? Let me pay attention. No, you're probably, I just, and then you feel guilty, and then it spirals, right? Does that, I don't know if you guys experience this, but if anyone's watching, like, does that resonate? So first thing, eat a breakfast in the morning. Now, in the morning, you could have a cheesecake or whatever it is on its own, but starting to ask yourself, like, what can I add to that? Like, how's this going to make me feel? If you want to have something sweet in the morning, give yourself permission to do that, but I would recommend adding a protein to it, because if you have something that's just like a dessert in the morning, you probably won't feel so good, because you will have like an energy, a sugar spike and a crash. So by just adding a protein, it helps slow the sugar absorption from that piece of cake or whatever you're having. And so not making it about I'm being good versus bad, but do you see how so many of the things I'm sharing, if you listen to your body, it will tell you if this feels good or bad. Like if you try having a cake on its own in the morning versus cake with some protein, I bet you're going to see a difference. And if you don't, it's possible that you're very blunted from your cues. So if anyone's listening to this and saying, okay, Rachel, I struggle with this, you probably need to get support to help you reconnect to your cues, because if you're not sensing anything that I'm sharing with you right now and you're having a hard time, it's probably a long history of dieting where, you know, you ignored your hunger because you're trying to stick to the diet, and now you've blunted, now you don't even trust your hunger. So if anything that I'm saying feels like it's difficult for you to play out and do, you probably need support in reconnecting to your cues, which will look a little bit different than what I'm sharing right now. But overall, don't come over, first things first, don't come overly hungry to the meal. Now, if you're not coming overly hungry to the meal, you can have more presence about you and be more conscious about what you're going to choose. So look at all the options, know that you can enjoy it, and ask yourself, what do I actually want? Because when you're in this diet mentality, you either say, I'm only going to have salad, not going to have any of the lasagna or whatever it is, and you're eyeing the lasagna the whole time, and either you end up feeling deprived, or when you have the lasagna, you're like, shoot, I ruined my day. Now I'm going to have a half a plate of lasagna, and then you feel gross. So instead, say, okay, I wonder what it would be curious. I wonder what it'd be like to like look at all the options, see what I actually want, put it on a plate, right? It's much easier to process what you've eaten when it's like on a plate instead of nibbling. Do you ever do that also where it's like, I'll just have a nibble and it's not counted? And then I'll just have a nibble and it's not counted. And then before you know it, you feel gross because you've had so many nibbles, you've had half the tray. And of course you're going to feel nasty. So instead and you're not even processing that you really had it. So now it's not even satisfying. So instead say, okay, I'm going to look at the options, see what I actually like. Sit down and enjoy that. Now at the table, it can be really chaotic, right, with like guests and like a lot going on. So I wouldn't say that's a moment to now have a fully mindful meal of meditation. Like that's not happening. So instead, just choose 3 points in your meal where you're just going to check in. So in the beginning, just noticing, how does this food taste? It'll probably taste the best in the beginning, because when you're really hungry, another mechanism of your body is to make food taste even better. So do you ever notice how like in the beginning of a meal, it still tastes good at the end, but it's the first few bites are always the best. And that's because your taste buds and receptors are like more highly responsive, and you have more of that reward response to like motivate you to keep eating, so you actually eat enough. Because if food didn't taste good, we wouldn't eat, and you know, on an extreme level, we would die. So paying attention to those first few bites, notice, what do I like? What do I not like? And if there's something on your plate that you do not like, please, please, please do not use yourself as the garbage can. You are allowed to not eat something you don't like. Even if you put it on your plate and it's going to go to the garbage, obviously we don't want to waste food. That's not what I'm saying. But you've already put it on your plate. Even if you're being hosted by someone, right? Would you ever use your body for anything else to please somebody else? No. So don't do that with food. So even if you're by somebody else, you took something, you're like, oh, actually, I don't like this. Don't eat it to please somebody else. Don't eat it because you're scared to waste it. Because here's the thing, if the only reason you're putting it into your body is to avoid putting it in the garbage can, then what does that make your body? A garbage can. It literally has no use. I mean, if you were starving in a desert, or not even a desert, I mean, there are people who are starving who are not in a desert, right? But people who are like, who have food insecurity, and that's the only thing you have, then yeah, I would tell you, force yourself to eat that, you need nourishment. But be grateful, practice gratitude, and say, wow, I'm so lucky there's such an abundance of food here that I actually do not have to eat this slice, and nothing's going to happen. And, you know, if you feel bad for people who are hungry, the children who are hungry, then make a donation to a soup kitchen or something. It's not going to help to eat it for them, right? And I think this is something really important to talk about, because I see so many people who feel guilty to waste food because we grew up with like the clean your plate club, right? But don't turn your body into a garbage can. So if there's something you don't like, you don't have to eat it. And then in middle of the meal also. So you're talking everything, but then when you're halfway through your meal, just check in, right? That 3-bite check in with your fork. Like, let me just, it literally takes 30 seconds. How's my body feeling? How's my stomach feeling? How am I enjoying it? And then also at the end of the meal. Now, if you want more, because it's just tasting good, you have permission to do that. But you also want to ask yourself, okay, it's tasting good. I can have it. Does it make sense to have it now? Can I enjoy that later? Or do I really want it now? You could have a second slice just to enjoy, but really pay attention if you're still enjoying it, because usually the fuller you get, the less of a positive experience you have at the end. And you don't want to just enjoy the taste, but you want to have an overall positive experience. And it's okay. Like, you can let yourself have that second serving. Don't make it into, again, it's 2 days. So you don't have to have that second serving, but if you do, just pay attention if you're really enjoying it or not. Other things you could do is, you can go for a walk. If you're feeling overwhelmed with the food in front of you, it's not about restriction, but sometimes you just do need a moment to reconnect to yourself. So you can just go to the bathroom. It's okay, I just need to recollect my thoughts, reconnect to my body a second, and then I'm going to come back with that if you're feeling overwhelmed with, like, if you have a lot of gas or just like a lot going on. And notice if, like, a lot of the eating that happens on Yom Tov can sometimes just also be like related to not boredom, because we're not really bored on Yom Tov, or maybe some people are,
We're
but
sitting around the table.
like
Like everyone should just sit around the table for hours.
yeah, exactly. And so that's another thing where it's you can have more, but I think part of it also, and again, everything I'm sharing, anyone who's listening, like, different parts of it might apply to you and others might not. It depends where you're at in your journey. So take what resonates and leave what doesn't. And also, you don't have to try to implement everything I'm throwing at you. I'm just trying to cover all the bases here. And so when it comes to, like, the meal, again, you can enjoy, but one, habit. Just start to notice your habit, because a lot of people they reach out their hand and they're not even realizing because they're talking. So if you can even just start to have the awareness of, like, what are my hands doing? Nothing to even do with, how I physically want to feel or the food. Just, can you notice your actual behavior? Because if you have a habit of just picking, you need to notice what you're actually doing instead of being like, no, I should stop. I'm being so bad. It's like, well, maybe I just need to work on, like, keeping my hands busy,
Fidget toys.
What's that?
They put fidget toys on the table.
Fidget toy, or, like, sometimes, like ripping a plastic cup. I sometimes do that, but like, find something, or just learn. I think people also need to learn to just truly be present. I think this is especially, like, if someone has social anxiety. I've had clients who, let's say, have social anxiety, and they'll be like, I eat because I just need something to do, to have that outlet. And so, do you need to work on coping skills of being present? So again, assess for yourself what's resonating and, like, what you need to work on. Another thing is, just as it's equally important to be able to enjoy food and be present with food and not feel guilty with eating food, part of healing your relationship with food is also recognizing and knowing how to enjoy life without having to have food involved all the time. So, for example, I always used to feel like, oh, okay, going out to a restaurant is always, like, the thing to do, and that's what's fun. But it's also been so freeing, and especially someone as a foodie, and I love going to restaurants, and I love different types of foods. But there's also something so freeing about knowing, like, hey, I could just have a regular dinner at home with my husband. This is not related to a holiday, but it's just to communicate the point. And then we'll just go for a walk or do something not food related, and it's fine because I can have the food later if I want to. So when you get to a point where you also can recognize it's not just all about the food, like, think about Yom Tov. Yes, food is a big part of our culture, but can you be present and actually socializing with the person and be like, wow, how awesome that I'm here with this person and chatting with them? Can I stay focused on them? If you really struggle, it depends on the context here. But you don't have to have a table, like, to keep the dessert all on the table. You can relocate yourself if it's more of a habitual struggle, right? I would say be careful here, and, like, are you trying to be restrictive in a negative way, or just like, I just want to set up an environment that's easier for me. Maybe we just need to relocate to the patio or to the kitchen or somewhere else. Or maybe, something that works for me is giving everyone a single serving dessert, and you don't have to have, like, a whole buffet.
Right.
Some people do that. That's awesome. You don't have to. So you could create some sort of an environment to help you with that, as long as your intention is truly about, I want to feel my best, and not rooted in, like, that judgmental thinking. So That's so far everything. I know I've thrown a lot at you, but what are your
Yeah.
thoughts? Any questions on
Yeah,
that?
so it's a perfect pause because we only have about a minute left until, I mean, in the past, we've been knocked off after an hour. So we may be able to go on a couple more minutes. Everything has just been, first of all, the timing of it is impeccable because we're going into
List.
Yontif next week, but Shavuos next week. But there's just before we sign off, I want to just go back to the beginning of the conversation when we talked about signs when parents need to go get support for their teenager. Can we just quickly point out what are some blatant signs where it's gone to a point where a teenager it's more than just disordered eating, and what are those signs where a teen has to go get
Yeah.
help?
Yeah, first of all, like a quick weight loss, like a significant weight loss it's not going to happen for everyone. Again, not everyone with an eating disorder has this like big weight loss drop, but definitely that's like the most obvious one. Like if your kid suddenly like lost a lot of weight, that should ring a ton of bells for you. And then are they skipping meals? Are they spending a lot of time in the bathroom after meals, right? Like what are they doing there? Are they, suddenly not eating any kind of sweets when they used to? Like, is there a huge significant change of pattern? If you ask them questions, are they making up a lot of excuses of like, no, I'm just nauseous, or no, I'm just like doing this, it's harmless diet with my friend or whatever it is. Do they seem stressed or anxious about like when they're eating? Do they like kind of look at food a lot and then not have it? Do they complain a lot about like, oh, I really like stuff myself and I feel so bad? Are they making like a lot of negative comments? What else? That's already like signs of an eating disorder. There's definitely more severe ones. Like, are they complaining they're cold all the time? That's definitely like, have they lost their period? But that's already definitely severe. Like that, I would hope they would get help before that. Their hair will thin out, their nails will get brittle. This is more so the anorexia eating disorder, but all the other ones as well. Don't wait till it's like that. If they're avoiding meals, spending a lot of time in the bathroom, making a lot of excuses, significant weight change, expressing guilt. I would say those are definitely
What
red
about over
flags.
exercising?
Over exercising, yes, thank you. Or spending a lot of time over exercising, or being so rigid with it. Like do they have now rituals and routines? Like in the morning, they have to have their lemon and water, which on its own is not problematic. But are they now being rigid, and is it coming with other things? Are they over exercising? Do they get stressed if they can't exercise? Are they squeezing it in like random times that technically like they don't have to? You know what I'm saying? Like at 9 o'clock at night, they have to get it in. So definitely seeing like the rigidity of it and the stress around it as well.
Okay. Wow. Wow. I have so much to think
We
about.
might have to have a part two one of
I
these
really
days.
feel like we want to bring you on again because there's so much we didn't even talk about. We had a list of questions that came
I
in,
don't know. I
and I don't even know
don't
if we
think we
tackled.
covered almost any of them.
I know. I know. So I think what we're going to do is maybe I mean, not maybe, we would love,
Yeah,
if you
we can
would be
talk
in
about that
agreement, we would
too.
love to bring you on again.
Right.
And
We
maybe
really appreciate like all your wisdom, your experience, your insights. I'm sure anyone who watches this will have learned something, whatever
I'm
they need to hear.
I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so glad to be here. And I'm so glad you guys were doing this live because there's not like as much as like it's becoming more awareness, it's like not nearly enough, especially when it comes to your kids and understanding when to get help and that it doesn't have to be an eating disorder. And one thing I want to end off with, I hope it doesn't time us out, is like with everything that I shared here, especially with specifically going into Shavuos, I think that hopefully these tips help you. And I have a free guide to help you with that. Like in the link in my bio, you can DM me. Like I have a free guide to help you feel more control with food, to like implement some of the things I shared here with you. Like I walk you through it step by step if you want that. So just shoot me a message and I'll send it to you. But remember that no matter how it plays out, lead with curiosity and compassion, because guilt and shame never leads to positive places. Like I love to say, every eating experience is a learning experience. It can go to the positive and you can be like, wow, I just figured out that if I just let myself have a piece of lasagna, I'm good with that lasagna and I don't have to have a whole ton. Or you might realize, like, actually, I lost a bit of control with that lasagna. Instead of feeling like triggering to like, I'm so bad, I'm so horrible, I have no willpower, and then that just leads you to a negative place of either, again, restricting or binging. Get reflective, get curious, say, what can I learn from it? I wonder why I felt out of control with it. Like, think of the things I just shared here. Like, did I come overly hungry? Was I trying to nibble my way through it? Am I engaging in all or none mentality? Was I just distracted and have a habit because of the social environment? And based on what you can reflect on and see, this is what I do with my clients all the time to help them get to the core issue. Because once you reflect and can learn from the experience, that's when you can make progress, because now you can be able to say, oh, okay, I lost control because I came overly hungry. Okay, so now I have to work on not coming overly hungry, or because I have this habit and I have to work on this habit. And of course, if you're struggling, get support to help identify that. But just remember, every eating experience is a learning experience, and curiosity and compassion is the way forward. Guilt and shame have not led you to positive places, so just leave that out when we go into the holiday.
Okay.
Love it.
Wow.
Love it.
Okay. Can I just ask one last question?
Yeah.
Do you prefer to go by Rachel or Rachel?
I don't mind if you call me Rachel. People call me here Rachel.
Okay.
I introduce myself as Rachel, but I've had so many different, like in high school I was Rachi, and then my family calls me Rachie, and then some people will say Rachel and Rachel. Here I go by Rachel, but you can
Okay.
call me Rachel if you want.
Okay. Okay. I just didn't want to mispronounce your name. That's all.
Well,
You're
thank
good.
you again for coming on.
Thanks,
You were
guys.
awesome. We'll speak again. Have a great Shavuos, and thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you
Bye. Thanks for
so
having me.
much.
Bye, guys.
Bye.